the TechCamp model, so I'm a trainer for US State Department. It's a initiative, it's a global initiative called TechCamp, and it was set up by Hillary Clinton. And the idea is to work with local communities, usually actually young CSOs or bloggers or activists, and work with them, training them in the technology that's available to them and the open source platforms or tools that are available. So there's usually, is my mic working? Yeah. There's usually about 10 or 12 different trainers. A lot of them are US-based trainers from companies like Frontline SMS, from OpenStreetMap, from Ushahidi. Lots of those going in and training these young people on the technologies that they could use to solve the problems that they have. So for example, in Kazakhstan, one of the problems that the young people came up with was, how do we address the violence that people from Central Asia, from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, how do we address the racism that they feel in Russia when they go to work in Russia, and the violence that sometimes, discrimination. So we came up with two tech solutions, and one was using Frontline SMS, an SMS system for those Central Asian people living in Russia. If there was spikes of violence, let's say around a train station or a bus station or whatever it was, to avoid the area. So that's, you know, combating the violent. But then how do we use technologies to make that relationship between the people in the two countries? How do we go some way to working on that? And we came up with a model that was very like a Facebook group that came out last year, which was Israel loves Iran and Iran loves Israel. These two separate Facebook groups that came up when relations between both governments were at a very strained level. Local Iranians, Israelis started it. Local Israeli people came up with this Facebook group, and it was simply Israel loves Iran. We're person to person, we love you. And they started this Facebook group, and Iran reciprocated with their own Facebook group, and they had thousands of people. So it's just looking at what the solutions are in different countries and what are the tech solutions for them. So Africa Check was one that came out of, that was in Zanzibar. So how do we hold politicians accountable for the election promises that they have given to a village or a town? So we're going to use crowd-sourced fact-checking has that politician built the school that he's used? And mapping is a big thing for mapping data. So that was the first part. That's what TechCamp does.
What was the second
funding?
part?
The funding comes, a lot of the funding comes from the US State Department. It's funded by USAID, I think, as well. And also there's usually a local funder that works in it. So when you go, you work with the local embassies, and they pick the young people in different, the local young people to work with.
And I think the third part of the question was to do with PNG.
Sorry, thank you for the first
PNG.
two answers. The third part of the question was about how you deal with issues of numeracy, literacy and connectivity in a place like PNG, and if you have any experiences from elsewhere that you could apply.
One of the interesting things and one of the barriers to a lot of access to technology is when you don't have the ability to write in your local language or your local font. So I worked on the Burma project with BBC last year, and even just to get Burmese font on my computer in order to have some of the documents up and look at it, or to use it on Facebook. It was a task and a half, and I'm quite tech savvy, but it was still quite a hard process to go down. And lots of Central Asian countries as well they work in languages that aren't available either online or via text message. What's interesting is that lots of people, the illiteracy is a massive barrier, but lots of people end up in different countries using pidgin English or a kind of a phonetic.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
So in northern Nigeria, I was in northern Nigeria a week and a half ago, and they'd use a mixture of Hausa and English or a kind of a pidgin English in their texting. So they do overcome it in certain ways, and often technology promotes people towards literacy because they need to be literate to use it in some shapes or form. But you never know, there might be a PNG tech camp on the cards.